For decades, the Roswell incident has captured the world's imagination, sparking debates, documentaries, and conspiracy theories.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection. Late this afternoon, a bulletin from New Mexico suggested that the widely publicized mystery of the flying saucers may soon be solved. Army Air Force officers reported that one of the strange discs had been found and inspected sometime last week.
It started in 1947 when a pilot saw strange flying objects over the skies of New Mexico.
We found a piece of metal about a foot and a half to 2 feet wide and about 2 or 3 feet long. Felt like you had nothing in your hands. It wasn't any thicker than the foil out of a pack of cigarettes. But the thing about that got me is that you couldn't even bend it, you couldn't dead it. Even with a sledgehammer would bounce off of it. So I knew that I had never seen anything like that before. And as of now, I don't know what it was. Took pictures, of course. They had a whole flock of microphones there. They wanted they wanted some comments from me, but I wasn't at liberty to do that. So all I could do is keep my mouth shut. And General Ramey is the one who discussed or told the newspapers, the newsmen, what it was and to forget about it. It was nothing more than a weather observation balloon. Of course, which we both knew differently. It was not anything from this earth that I'm quite sure of, because being an intelligence officer, I was familiar with just about all materials used in aircraft and in our air travel. This is nothing like that.
And it quickly escalated into one of the most famous UFO cases in history. Years of secrecy, military denials, and conflicting reports have deepened the mystery.
The 1942 Buick we had was loaded with the stuff in the backseat and in the trunk area. At any rate, it brought the material in and spread it on the kitchen floor, and in an effort to try to piece it together.
And that's when I saw the writing or the symbols of some sort. I thought at first, this is hieroglyphics or some kind of writing like that. It certainly looked alien to me.
It was a cover story. The balloon part of it is the story that's to be given to the press, and that is it, and anything else, forget it.
Now, NASA scientists are stepping forward with UFO evidence that stayed hidden for years.
Yes, there have been ET visitation, there have been crashed craft, there have been material and bodies recovered, and there is some group of people somewhere that may or may not be associated with government at this point, but certainly were at one time, that have this knowledge.
Early radar and sightings. It all started in the summer of 1947, when the skies over the United States were filled with strange objects, and radar screens in the Southwest were picking up mysterious blips that no one could understand. On June 24, 1947, private pilot Kenneth Arnold was flying his small airplane near Mount Rainier in Washington when he saw a formation of 9 bright, fast-moving objects. He estimated their speed at over 1,200 miles per hour and described their motion as like a saucer if you skip it across water. This is a phrase that the media latched onto and made it into the term, the flying saucer. Arnold's detailed account was picked up widely by newspapers. In the weeks that followed, similar sightings were reported, with hundreds of civilians and even pilots reporting strange things in the sky. Just days later, on July 1st to 2, radar operators at military installations near Roswell and the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico started tracking fast, unidentified blips that were darting erratically across their scopes. The radars were appearing and disappearing without a clear explanation. Even stranger, these blips coincided with numerous civilian reports of unusual lights and objects over the grim New Mexico desert skies. There were also summer lighting storms that added an eerie backdrop to already strange observations. Ranchers and locals described lights pulsing and vanishing overhead, creating an atmosphere of confusion and curiosity. With the odd radar activity, combined with multiple visual reports, there were a lot of rumors that something strange was happening in the skies. This set the stage for the Roswell incident that would eventually capture national attention. Debris discovery. In early July 1947, a humble sheep ranch outside Corona, New Mexico, became the center of attention when rancher Mac Brazel stumbled upon something that didn't belong on his land. While making his rounds on the remote J.B. Foster Ranch, a place with no electricity, phone, or close neighbors, Brazel noticed an expansive field of scattered debris that was different from anything he had ever seen during his years in the rugged Southwest. The fragments were initially spotted around June 14th, but it wasn't reported until days later. It caught his eye because they were spread out in a line across hundreds of yards, almost as if something above had shredded apart in midair and deposited the pieces across the sagebrush and gravel of his pasture. What made this debris so strange was its appearance and physical qualities. The material looked like thin metallic foil, rubber strips, and thick paper-like sheets that glittered in the desert sun. Yet when they looked closely, they found out that they were strangely lightweight, unbelievably strong, and resistant to any cutting or burning. These characteristics were something that you won't expect on the land of someone who simply farmed. Some witnesses who saw the reflective scraps said that it was impossibly thin and yet durable. It seemed more like a material of conventional aircraft construction rather than something for a farm. He wasn't sure what he had seen, but the news of flying saucers was all over the internet. So, Brazel collected the strange objects that were on his farm and drove to nearby Roswell to show the sheriff. This was the first step in a series of events that became a cover-up. The military explained that this could be part of a secret military program, but then they suddenly retracted their statement. Military announcement and retraction. When Mac Brazel brought the unusual debris from his Corona property to local authorities, military intelligence at Roswell Army Airfield quickly got involved. On July 8th, the base's Public Information Office issued a press release that stunned the nation. The Army Air Forces announced that they had recovered a flying disc, and it was now in their possession. As you can expect, this news quickly spread across newspapers in the country, with front-page attention given to what seemed to be the first confirmed crash retrieval of an extraterrestrial craft. The announcement came at the height of a national UFO craze sparked by pilot Kenneth Arnold's sightings just weeks earlier and captured the public's imagination like few stories had before. But the excitement was short-lived. Mere hours after the flying disc headlines spread across the nation, senior military leadership intervened. At Fort Worth Army Airfield in Texas, General Roger Ramey held a press conference that dramatically retracted the earlier claim. In front of photographers and reporters, Ramey presented pieces and said that this was not anything from an extraterrestrial craft, but ordinary wreckage from a weather balloon instead. They insisted that they were aluminum foil, wooden sticks, and rubber strips, and that this was the true source of the Roswell controversy. Along with him were other officers, including Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer originally sent to investigate the site. Marcel and others publicly backed the balloon explanation, saying that the mysterious materials were simply part of a meteorological device. At the same time, many people accepted the explanation that it was a weather balloon, and said that the military made an overzealous release. But now, the problem is, the military quickly jumped on this to reverse the case. Also, Brazel would have known if a hot air balloon left debris on his farm. Still, the case was forgotten for a few years, but in the late 1970s, ufologists revived the case and revealed something shocking. Witness testimonies and 1970s revival. In the late 1970s, the case was dormant for many decades. Then, it suddenly came under the spotlight because researchers started looking into the situation. Nuclear physicist and ufologist Stanton Friedman heard a tip in 1978 while waiting for a TV interview in Louisiana. A local radio manager mentioned that Major Jesse Marcel, the Air Force intelligence officer who had helped retrieve the original Roswell debris, was still living nearby and had always believed the material didn't come from Earth. Intrigued, Friedman tracked him down and conducted a detailed interview. In the interview, Marcel shocked the world when he rejected the official explanation and said that the wreckage was unlike any known terrestrial material. Friedman's work didn't stop with Marcel. He started digging into the old reports, located additional witnesses, and assembled their statements, realizing that this was a major government cover-up. He later called this cosmic Watergate. These accounts included claims of materials with unusual physical properties and stories hinting that military personnel had been instructed to stay silent. Then he recorded his findings in the book The Roswell Incident, along with Charles Berlitz and William Moore. This book took the Roswell mystery back to the headlines again. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, ufologists including Kevin Randle and Don Schmitt expanded upon these witness testimonies. They surprised the world when they revealed more eyewitness accounts and claims of multiple crash sites and alien bodies. These eventually came together, expanding the infamous Roswell mystery. Expanded conspiracy claims. Once Friedman's book was released, the world saw a flood of personal testimonies and dramatic claims that made the Roswell case even more interesting. Major Jesse Marcel was insisting that the material he handled was not of this Earth, telling researchers that the pieces he brought home were extremely light, super strong, and even covered in strange hieroglyphic-like symbols that he and his son tried to interpret. Marcel Jr. described geometric markings, like circles, squares, and triangles, embossed on fragments that were very different from conventional aircraft technology. Aside from the debris, other witnesses added their inputs. A mortician, Glenn Dennis, remembered being asked about child-sized hermetically sealed coffins shortly after the incident, and claimed that a nurse described an alien autopsy, although the nurse's identity could not be verified. Some former base personnel and military affiliates also revealed something shocking, saying that they recovered small humanoid bodies from a separate crash site and taken under heavy guard to secure bases. If this was true, it means the military intentionally suppressed the information. Many witnesses also claimed that those who tried to speak openly about the Roswell case were facing a lot of pressure to stay silent. Many stories were circulating of military roadblocks, threats to careers or even lives, and social intimidation, with people being forced to keep what happened in New Mexico a secret. With all the news, it became known that a cover-up might have been going on. So, the Air Force decided to carry out an investigation again, and they said it was a different kind of air balloon. Official investigations. In the 1990s, the U.S. Air Force decided to investigate the Roswell incident because of the increasing public interest and congressional inquiry. In 1994, after an exhaustive search of decades-old files and records, the Air Force released the Roswell Report, Fact versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert. The 1,000-page investigation concluded that the debris recovered near Roswell in July 1947 was not from an extraterrestrial spacecraft, but belonged to Project Mogul. This was a top-secret Army Air Forces program that used high-altitude balloons equipped with sensitive acoustic and radar reflective equipment to monitor Soviet nuclear tests during the early Cold War. The materials and construction of Mogul balloon trains, including metallic radar reflectors and balloon remnants, were used to explain the strange debris found on the farm. The report stated that one of the reasons for the confusion was compartmentalization, which is a deliberate restriction of information to only those with a need to know. Even highly cleared personnel in the 509th Bomb Group, the unit that first handled the debris, were not informed about Project Mogul's existence because their job focused on nuclear weapons delivery and not atmospheric surveillance. So, according to the Air Force, the team had no reference for the unusual materials they found, which is what made them suspect that the objects were extraterrestrial. The Air Force's research didn't find any evidence of alien technology or occupant recovery in their official records, and stated that there was no cover-up of any kind. Not everyone believed the Air Force's investigation results. After all, how could they investigate themselves? Public skepticism. When the U.S. Air Force published its 1994 and 1997 Roswell reports to address decades of UFO speculation, it expected to quiet the Roswell controversy once and for all. Instead, public skepticism hardened, at first because of independent reviews, especially a Government Accountability Office inquiry, which stated that many relevant Roswell-era records were missing or destroyed. According to that GAO search, administrative files from March 1945 through December 1949 and the outgoing messages from October 1946 through the end of 1949 were destroyed under unknown authority. The record-keeping forms didn't specify why or by whom. These gaps included the critical periods immediately before and after the July 1947 incident. Critics seized on this lack of documentation as evidence that their official narrative was either incomplete or deceptive. They asked why these routine administrative messages were missing, especially the kinds of communication that would show how base officials explained events up the chain of command. Ufologists have said that the destruction of these records was evidence of delayed disclosure or intentional concealment of relevant details. Some researchers have said that the lack of records undermines the Air Force's claim that Roswell was merely a Project Mogul balloon crash because there's no paper trail showing how decisions were made. Many were also skeptical because of the way the Air Force managed access to documents. For years, they diverted congressional requests to the National Archives where no Roswell files were found, before only locating the internal materials. Despite the skepticism, it seemed like the case was about to die down, only for news about a second crash to emerge. Second crash site narrative. In the years after the official Roswell press releases, a parallel narrative took shape in UFO research circles. This claimed that the 1947 event wasn't just about a field of strange debris. Instead, there was a second crash site, which existed where an intact craft and alien bodies were recovered. But the idea was kept under the wraps until decades after the incident in the late 1970s and 1980s, as ufologists collected personal testimonies and alleged whistleblower statements that weren't found in the original military accounts. Some testimonies say that shortly after Rancher Brazel discovered the lightweight metallic fragments, another set of wreckage was found elsewhere in the desert. But this location didn't only have a lot of debris, but also signs of biological remains. One of the more dramatic strands of these claims centers on Walter Haut, the Roswell Army Airfield Public Information Officer who had issued the first flying disc press release. In an affidavit prepared later in life, Haut said that the first announcement was a deliberate diversion to draw attention away from a more significant second site, where most of the craft and several non-human bodies were retrieved and secured by military teams. Local eyewitnesses and later interviewees asserted that small humanoid figures, roughly 4 feet tall with large heads, were seen under tarps at a secure hangar, and that soldiers were ordered to remove the craft and bodies under strict supervision. Additional accounts, including claims from descendants of personnel involved, have added layers to this narrative, such as assertions that one recovered body was even alive at the second site, and that unusual beams or fragments marked with mysterious symbols were taken into custody. These stories helped cement the idea that Roswell wasn't a single debris field, but a complex twin-site event, with the second location kept secret and shrouded in military silence. These eyewitness and whistleblower claims continue to drive interest into what really happened in New Mexico in 1947. But the Roswell incident wasn't all that happened in that single year. UFO sightings in New Mexico. The summer of 1947 saw a lot of UFO sightings in New Mexico, especially the airspace around Roswell and White Sands. The modern UFO era had been launched just weeks earlier when pilot Kenneth Arnold reported 9 sleek, high-speed flying objects near Mount Rainier, Washington, a sighting that the press transformed into reports of flying saucers. According to some ufologists and later accounts, numerous sightings were reported in New Mexico in the period surrounding the Roswell incident, with locals and military personnel spotting different UFOs. Independent chronologies, like those assembled by the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, record reports from June and July 1947 of shiny disks or rotating objects high in the sky near White Sands Missile Range, a site that was already familiar with missile and rocket testing. One documented case involved a rocket lab expert at White Sands on June 29th, who, along with colleagues, claimed to see a shiny disk crossing the sky at high speed before it disappeared, an observation that was later archived alongside other reports from the same period. Recovery operations and alien body. After the 1947 event, testimonies, memoirs, and alleged affidavits emerged, revealing that there were alien bodies related to the Roswell event. According to numerous accounts that surfaced decades later, when the military cordoned off the crash area near Corona and Roswell in early July 1947, witnesses claimed that they saw something shocking. There was a rapid, highly organized response with soldiers, MPs, and Air Force personnel arriving quickly, securing the site, and then moving debris with an urgency and secrecy that shocked local observers. This was definitely not a simple weather balloon recovery. The witnesses claimed that they saw trucks, transport vehicles, and even gurneys and crates that were loaded onto aircraft bound for secure military facilities. But it became even stranger when some witnesses and researchers said that there were bodies of 5 small humanoid beings on the crash site. These entities were described as roughly 4 feet tall, with disproportionately large heads, almond or slanted eyes, pale grayish skin, and tight-fitting suits that appeared unlike any human garment. One affidavit came from Walter Hote, the public information officer at Roswell Army Airfield, which stated that he saw bodies under the sheets in a hangar, and that there was a second wreck site. Additional testimony from figures like mortician Glenn Dennis, who said a nurse described small bodies at the base hospital, reinforced this narrative in UFO literature, even though investigators later found inconsistencies and unverified details in many of these stories. Media cover-up. In the aftermath of the Roswell incident, the media cover-up was just as controversial as the crash itself. When Lothar Walter Haut issued the original flying disc press release on July 8, 1947, it was distributed to local radio stations and newspapers, and broadcasters like station manager W.E. Whitmore at KGFL and radio managers at KSWS were poised to share the sensational story. Within hours, however, military and government officials started intervening to stop other media channels from broadcasting the news. In fact, KSWS teletype operator Lydia Sleppy was in the middle of transmitting a flying saucer report to ABC and Mutual networks when the FBI allegedly interrupted and killed the broadcast, effectively cutting off wider dissemination of the story. At the same time, the Federal Communications Commission placed a lot of pressure on the station owners, warning them that if they aired any material about the Roswell incident, they could lose their licenses. It was clear that they were using regulatory threats to enforce silence. One account even asserts that U.S. Senator Dennis Chavez's office urged KGFL not to air the story, implying political intervention to suppress coverage of the findings. These reported interventions contributed to a chilling effect among local journalists and broadcasters. Frank Joyce, a radio announcer at KGFL, later recalled being instructed not to run further stories, fearing punitive consequences if military and federal authorities deemed the reporting a threat to national security. Ufologists have said that this is clear proof of a cover-up, as the government clearly didn't want the people to know. One thing that the government kept a secret was the fact that they transported a lot of debris from New Mexico to their military bases. Transporting debris. When the Roswell debris was gathered up in July 1947, witnesses saw pieces that were definitely extraordinary in their physical properties. They were ultra-lightweight, unusually resilient, and capable of springing back to shape after being crumpled. Rancher Mac Brazel and neighbors recalled trying to cut or burn the foil-like fragments, only to find they resisted deformation and seemed to return to their original profile when unfolded, a trait that puzzled everyone present and fed speculation that the material was beyond ordinary balloon equipment. Military personnel treated the recovered wreckage with extreme secrecy. Multiple guarded transports of the material actually took place. The pieces were loaded under armed escort onto specially designated aircraft bound for Fort Worth Army Airfield in Texas, then onward to scientific facilities such as Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, near Washington, D.C., for analysis and, in some variants of the story, Kirtland Air Force Base and Los Alamos in New Mexico for secure examination. The flights were under strict supervision, with crates tightly sealed and watched by military police to prevent leakage of sensitive contents. While official histories maintain that the debris was from a classified Project Mogul surveillance balloon, whose unusual materials were unfamiliar at the time, the enduring descriptions of light, resilient, shape-restoring metal, and the notion of high-security transport have become hallmark elements of the Roswell legend. But as we now review the previous investigations, experts are paying attention to some controversial memos. Controversial memo. In the mid-1990s, ufologist Stanton Friedman got his hands on the original photographic negatives from the 1947 Roswell press conference, where the military displayed debris that was claimed to be from a weather balloon. With enhanced analysis, he reported that portions of the blurred text on a memo in the photographs became decipherable. Some of the words included urgent, victims, wreck, and the name of Air Force General Hoyt Vandenberg, along with references to a disc to be shipped by B-29. Proponents interpreted these fragments as implying the military had recovered something far more extraordinary than a balloon and deliberately presented a false story to the press, aligning with claims of a cover-up. Skeptics, however, note that the memo's text remains partially illegible, and conclusions drawn from enhanced negatives are disputed, but the document continues to fuel debates about whether Roswell involved extraterrestrial material rather than mundane debris. Witnesses warned after the Roswell incident. Numerous witnesses faced threats and intimidation from military personnel, warning them never to discuss what they had seen. Civilians like Mac Brazel and local mortician Glenn Dennis claimed that silence was enforced through veiled threats of severe consequences, contributing to widespread fear and confusion. As a result, public attention waned for decades, and Roswell became largely relegated to local UFO circles. The story was revived in 1978-1980 by researchers such as Stanton Friedman, alongside publications by Bill Moore and Charles Berlitz, which brought mainstream focus to alleged extraterrestrial recoveries. This caused the U.S. Air Force to release reports, saying that the bodies that the witnesses saw weren't exactly what you might expect. Dummies. Explanation. The U.S. Air Force issued a report in the 1990s, stating that the alien bodies recovered at Roswell were in fact crash test dummies used in high-altitude balloon experiments, such as those connected to Project Mogul and other training exercises. These dummies were reportedly deployed to simulate human passengers for testing parachutes and equipment, and were retrieved after accidental crashes or malfunctions. According to the Air Force, this explanation resolved claims of small humanoid figures with unusual features. But many people have questioned the consistency of this account because there are discrepancies in timing, descriptions of the bodies, and secrecy surrounding the operations. Skeptics have argued that the dummies' explanation does not account for the eyewitness reports of multiple crashes, unusual debris, and the rapid military response. Still, the Roswell incident continues to stand in between myth and skepticism. Skepticism and mythology. The Roswell incident remains a blend of fact, speculation, and mythology, complicated by missing or destroyed records, inconsistent witness accounts, and decades of evolving testimony. Critics have said that it's difficult to investigate while depending on the recollections made by witnesses decades after the events, because their memories can be affected by media, personal interpretation, or external pressure. The Air Force's Project Mogul explanation and the later crash test dummy story aim to provide rational, grounded explanations. But many witnesses dispute these claims, citing unusual debris, rapid military responses, and alleged alien bodies. Lost or improperly documented records from 1947 further fuel uncertainty, leaving gaps that are easily filled by speculation. With all of this said, what really happened near Roswell? It could be a top-secret military program, an ordinary balloon or aircraft crash, or something more extraordinary, like the remains of a flying saucer. What do you think the truth is? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. So, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.